Hello students, welcome back to the next section of the chapter life processes. So in the last session we have discussed about the nutrition in human beings. So which are the steps in nutrition in human beings and about the digestive system of human being, right? We have learned about the different parts of the digestive system and we also have discussed about the enzymes which will act during the digestion. So I have briefly said you about the different kinds of enzymes which is released during the digestion process. So here in this class we are going to discuss in brief about the digestion taking place in the human digestive system. So in nutrition process the first step is ingestion. So in the first step ingestion, what is the process? It's the process wherein animals take in the food. So how do the human being take in the food? Human being take in the food by using your hands. You just put it into your mouth, right? That is the process of ingestion in human beings. So ingestion is happening in the mouth. So it is the process of taking in food into the mouth by using your hand. That is ingestion. So the second step during the nutrition process is digestion. The second step is digestion. So digestion is one of the lengthy process during the nutrition process. So it happens in the different parts of the digestive system. So we will be learning about what is happening throughout the digestive system during digestion process here. So digestion starts where? It starts from right from the mouth itself. So digestion starts from mouth. So we are taking the food into our mouth. So as soon as we put the food into our mouth, the digestion process begins. So in the mouth, what we have? Mouth have teeth, tongue and salivary glands which will help in digestion. So it's having teeth. So what's the function of teeth? Teeth helps in physical digestion. So physical digestion means teeth helps to what? It helps to cut the food item. So what's happening is in the mouth, teeth help in physical digestion by cutting the food into smaller pieces. So larger particles, larger pieces of the food will be broken down cut into very fine particles by the help of teeth. So it is helping in physical digestion in the mouth. Then what does the tongue do? So tongue the tongue helps to mix the food with the saliva secreted by the salivary gland. So it helps in mixing the food properly with the saliva. So when we swallow the food has to be wetted because our alimentary canal is very soft. The inner lining is very soft. So it should not be injured, right? So we have to convert the food into a smooth particle. So it has to be wetted. If it is dry, if you try to swallow something dry food, it will injure your food pipe. So it has to be wetted along with the saliva. So that will be done with the tongue. So tongue helps in mixing the food properly with the saliva. Then third one is saliva. So there is the salivary gland. Salivary gland. So salivary gland will produce salivary amylase. So it will produce a juice, right? It will produce saliva. What is that? Saliva is nothing but it's an enzyme called as salivary amylase. So I have said you in the last class about amylase. Amylase is an enzyme which acts upon carbohydrate. So the salivary gland in our mouth contains an enzyme called as salivary amylase. So where is salivary gland present? It is present in the buccal cavity. So it is found three kind of salivary glands you can find in your mouth. So one you can find a pair of salivary gland near your ear, just in front of the ear you can find. One in this region and another one is below your tongue. So three pairs of salivary gland is present in our buccal cavity which will produce an enzyme called as salivary amylase. So what is the function of salivary amylase is to break down the carbohydrate component of the food. So which component? Carbohydrate will be digested by salivary amylase. So it will break down the carbohydrate or larger complex molecule of carbohydrates into simple sugar. That is what is happening by the help of salivary amylase. So saliva is helping in digestion of carbohydrate in the mouth itself. So we can say the digestion starts from your mouth itself. When we see some delicious food items, our mouth start to water, right? So what is that water produced in our mouth when you see some delicious food? Is nothing but it is a saliva which contain an enzyme called as salivary amylase. So that is how the digestion happens in your mouth. So you can say digestion starts from your mouth itself. So in mouth, three things are there which will help in digestion. One is teeth, the other one is tongue, and the third one is salivary gland. teeth help in cutting the food, tongue helps in mixing the food with saliva, and salivary gland helps in breaking down the carbohydrate. Salivary gland produces salivary amylase, which will break down the carbohydrate into simple sugar. So the digestion process, the chemical digestion is happening by the help of salivary gland. So digestion actually begins in the mouth itself. But what happens, we are keeping the food in the mouth only for few minutes, right? It will be not kept for a long time, only for a short period of time the food will be remaining in our mouth. So the complete digestion will not happen there. Only partial digestion of carbohydrate takes place in the mouth. So only carbohydrate has been digested in the mouth, that too partially. It is not completely digested. Partial digestion of carbohydrate takes place in the mouth. Is it clear? So next, let us see what happens after the digestion happening in the mouth. So after the digestion in the mouth, the food will be pushed into our stomach through a long pipe called as food pipe, or it can be also called as esophagus. Food will pass from the mouth, it will be reaching through stomach through the long tube called as food pipe. It's also called as esophagus. So after the digestion in the mouth, the food will be reaching into the stomach through esophagus, I said, food pipe. So it's a long tube like structure. So food has to move from mouth till our stomach. So in the mouth itself, it will be made, the movement of the food will be made smooth by mixing it with the saliva. It will be wetted, so that it will be having a smooth movement throughout the food pipe. And also if it has to be pushed from mouth till the stomach, that long length, it should have some kind of pushing movement. So that kind of movement is called as peristaltic movement. So from the mouth, the food will be rolled into a ball like structure called as bolus. So you have bolus here. So that bolus has to move throughout the esophagus. So that happens by a peristaltic movement. So what is peristaltic movement is, the wall of the esophagus can contract and relax. So when it makes a contraction and relaxation, it will make a wavy like movement. You can see here, it will produce a wavy kind of movement, and this wavy kind of movement helps in the pushing of bolus towards the stomach from the mouth. So this kind of movement which is happening is called as peristaltic movement. So if at all they ask you, you can say peristaltic movement is the wavy kind of motion, wavy kind of movement happening in the esophagus by the contraction and relaxation of the muscles of the food pipe or muscles of the esophagus. So which will help in pushing the bolus of the food or the food ball towards the stomach. So that's what happened in the esophagus. Peristaltic movement by which food has been pushed into the stomach. Now the food has been reached into stomach. So what happens in the stomach is, the stomach will churn the food. Churning process happens in the stomach, so that it will be crushing the food items within the stomach. So stomach is a J-shaped organ, you can see here. It's a J-shaped organ. So this even the stomach will be having a kind of contraction and relaxation happening by the muscles of the stomach wall, which will crush the food items into smaller bits. So that is called as churning process. So stomach will churn the food items into smaller bits, and it will convert the food into a pasty form. It will convert into a liquid paste. And there what happens? Further digestion happens. So there stomach will produce a kind of juice by the glands of the inner wall of the stomach, will produce a kind of juice called as gastric juice. Stomach produce gastric juice, very important, will be asked for 3 marks. So stomach produces gastric juice. So what are the content of gastric juice? What does this gastric juice contain? It contains 3 liquids, that is hydrochloric acid, pepsin and mucus. So 3 components of gastric juice are hydrochloric acid, pepsin and mucus. Now let us see what is the function of all these 3 components. First, hydrochloric acid. So your stomach wall, stomach can produce a kind of acid called as hydrochloric acid. So this hydrochloric acid's function is to kill the germs in the food. It kills the germs present in the food. So when we have the food, by mistake, they might have some kind of germs or bacteria in that. So it has to be killed, otherwise it will infect our body. So it has to be killed. That will be done by the help of hydrochloric acid. So one of the function of hydrochloric acid is to kill the germs present in the food. It has one more function. So you know, the second enzyme here is pepsin. I have told you about pepsin. Pepsin is an enzyme which will act on protein, which will digest the protein. So if the protein has to be digested, if the pepsin has to act on protein, the food should be in acidic medium. It should be having an acidic medium. That acidic medium is provided by hydrochloric acid. So hydrochloric acid is an acid, right? So it will provide acidic medium. So it will convert the food into acidic condition. So it will convert into acidic nature. So what happened? This hydrochloric acid is actually helping in initiating the digestion of protein, initiating the action of pepsin on protein. So if it is not acidic, pepsin will not act on protein. So only if it is acidic in medium, then the pepsin acts. So hydrochloric acid is indirectly initiating the action of pepsin on protein. So what are the two functions of hydrochloric acid? One is to kill the germs in the food. Second is to initiate the digestion of pepsin on protein. It will help in starting the process of digestion of protein by activating the pepsin enzyme. So next is pepsin. As I said, pepsin is an enzyme which will act on protein. So it will digest the protein into amino acid. Pepsin has been digested into pepsin will digest protein into amino acid. So digestion of protein into amino acid happens by pepsin. So final product of protein is you are getting amino acid, simpler form. Next is mucus. The third thing produced in the gastric juices, it contains mucus. So what is the function of mucus? So mucus is produced by the tubular glands of the inner lining of the stomach. It contains long tubular glands. So that tubular glands will help in production of mucus. Mucus protects the inner wall of the stomach from the acid. So what happens when we are not having any kind of food in our stomach? When we are having empty stomach. At that time, even at that time, the acid will be produced continuously in your stomach. So what happens? This acid may burn the inner wall of your stomach, and it leads to gastric, and if it is not treated in proper time, it leads to ulcer even. So that will be prevented by the help of mucus. So mucus will prevent the burning of our inner wall of the stomach by the protecting the inner wall of the stomach. So mucus will react with the acid. So inner wall of the stomach will be protected from acid burns. So that is the function of mucus. So that is why we elder people say not to be in empty stomach. So we should have something in our stomach. Otherwise it leads to gasicity, they say, right? Or it leads to ulcer. Because this acid will be acting. There is no food to act on. So it will act on what? It will act on your inner wall of the stomach. So you should have some kind of food items always in your stomach. So that's the process of digestion happening in our stomach. So you can say in stomach what has been digested? Protein. Only protein has been digested in stomach. Whereas in mouth only carbohydrate was digested. Right? So we have one more component to be digested, that is fat. Right? And stomach also contains one more component called as renin. It's not given in your reader. There is one more component called as renin. So this renin is not present in the adult people. It is present only in the babies. The babies who feed on the milk of the mother or who drinks milk, small babies. So when they are small babies, they will not have all kind of this pepsins or amylase and all in their body. So they will be having the ability to digest only milk up to the month of 6 at least. Till the month of 6 they will be having only much production of renin in their stomach. So renin helping curdling of milk. It's actually helping in initiating the digestion of milk. So that's the reason why doctors say not to provide any other kind of food to the babies unless the mother's milk. So because baby is not having any other kind of enzymes produced in their body to digest all of the components of the food, or it cannot digest the complex food components. So it can digest only milk. So it is having more amount of renin in their stomach. So that will be reduced. The renin quantity will be reduced as the child grow older and older. So it will be reduced. Only in the babies you can find this renin enzyme called as renin. Okay. So that's the digestion in stomach. Next, what happens from the stomach? It is be entering into the small intestine. The food will be entering into small intestine. From the stomach, it will be pushed into small intestine. So this stomach has been connected to small intestine. So you can see small intestine is a very long tube. From the stomach, the food will be released into the small intestine in a controlling manner. So what controls the pushing of food from stomach into small intestine is there is a kind of muscles here present between the stomach and the small intestine called as sphincter muscles. Called as sphincter muscle. So the sphincter muscle will control the movement of food from stomach to the small intestine. It will not be pushed at once. In a controlled manner, it will be pushed into the small intestine. So next, the food from stomach enters into small intestine. So small intestine is one of the longest part of the alimentary canal. It runs to about 6.5 meters long in adult human beings. So it may vary based on the habit of food what the animals have. So if the food habits, it may be carnivorous or it may be herbivorous or it may be omnivorous. So herbivorous animals means they are the plant eating animals. Cattle and all belong to herbivores. They will usually have the grasses and plants. You know, grasses and plants having a special component in their cell wall called as cellulose, right? So they have something called as cellulose. So this cellulose cannot be digested by the human digestive system. It can be digested only by the herbivorous plants, herbivorous animals. So herbivorous animals having a very long small intestine than the human beings. So it will runs to about 9 meters long or something. So it is very lengthy than the human being's small intestine. So because it is to digest the cellulose completely. So in order to digest the cellulose component completely, they have a very long small intestine. So they may ask this question in the exams, why the herbivores is having long intestine, small intestine. Whereas we take carnivores, flesh, they are flesh eating. So meat can be digested very fast. So they usually have a shorter small intestine. So they have a short small intestine. So you can find the small intestine in a human digestive system. It will be found as a coiled system. So since it is a very lengthy one, it will be coiled. It will be arranged like a coiled system. So the food will be entering into small intestine from the stomach. So in the small intestine, what happens? So small intestine receives the secretion from two other glands. So which are the two other glands? It's from liver and pancreas. So from liver, what they get is, liver produce a juice called as bile juice. It's a yellow color, straw color liquid called as bile juice. So liver produce bile juice, and that bile juice will be temporarily stored in a small bladder like structure which you can find under the liver called as gallbladder. So gallbladder will store the liver secretion, that is bile juice will be stored in the gallbladder. Then it will be released into the small intestine. So from here it will be releasing into the small intestine. It will be reaching the small intestine. So the small intestine receives the juice from the liver as well as from the pancreas. So here this is pancreas. From the pancreas and from the gallbladder it will be receiving the juice into small intestine. So the small intestine is receiving juice from liver as well as pancreas. Liver produce bile juice stored in the gallbladder. It's a yellow color liquid. So liver is alkaline in nature. Bile is alkaline in nature. So bile is alkaline in nature. So what happens is it will help in neutralizing the acidic food coming from the stomach. You know, in the stomach it is producing hydrochloric acid, right? So that hydrochloric acid produced in the stomach makes the food acidic. So it has to be neutralized when it reaches the small intestine. Only then bile salt can act upon that. So it has to be neutralized. So for neutralizing process, bile, it being alkaline, being basic in nature, it can neutralize the acidic food coming from the stomach. That is one function of bile juice. So bile being alkaline in nature, it can neutralize the acidic food coming from stomach. Second is, bile contain a salt called as bile salt. So what is the function of bile salt is to break the fat component of the food into smaller fat droplets. It will break the larger molecule of fat into smaller droplets of fat or smaller globules of fat. That process of breaking larger molecule of fat into smaller molecules is called as emulsification process. It's known as emulsification process. So bile salt help in emulsification. So the smaller droplets of fat can be easily digested further. It can be further digested very easily when it has been broken down into smaller pieces. So that is the function of bile. So what is the function of bile juice? One is to neutralize the food, acidic food coming from the stomach, because bile is basic in nature or it's alkaline in nature. So it will neutralize the food items. So it has to be neutralized. The acidity has to be neutralized. Only then the bile salt can emulsify the fat. So it will be neutralized. Then what happens? Bile salt, what's the function of bile salt is to break the fat molecules into smaller droplets of fat globules. So larger molecule of fat is being broken down into smaller droplets of fat by the help of bile salt, and that process of breaking larger molecule of fat into smaller molecule of fat is called as emulsification process. So bile helps in emulsification and neutralizing the food. So next, small intestine is also receiving the food, juice from pancreas. So the juice produced from pancreas is called as pancreatic juice. So it produces pancreatic juice. So even the pancreatic juice also contains 3 components. So what is the function of that 3 components? Let us discuss now. So now the intestine receives the juice from pancreas. It's called as pancreatic juice. So pancreatic juice is again having 3 components called as pancreatic amylase, trypsin and lipase. So what is the function of pancreatic amylase? As I said before, amylase is an enzyme which will act on carbohydrate. So here pancreatic amylase also act on carbohydrate. So where you have come across amylase before? You have come across the word amylase in saliva, right? It contains salivary amylase. So what is the function of salivary amylase there? It digests, it acts on carbohydrate, right? It will break the carbohydrate or starch into simple sugar. So even here the same thing will be done. So pancreas act on starch, it will digest the starch into simple sugar. Next you have another component called as trypsin. I have said you pepsin and trypsin are the protein digesting enzyme. So where you come across pepsin is in stomach, trypsin is in intestine. So that is from pancreas. So pancreas produced enzyme called as trypsin. So function of trypsin is to digest protein. It acts on protein. So next you have one more enzyme called as lipase. Lipase. So lipase acts on fat, emulsified fat. So you learn liver helps in emulsifying the fat. What do you mean by emulsifying the fat? Larger molecule of fat has been broken down into smaller molecule of fat, I said, right? That's called as emulsifying the fat. So that emulsified fat will be further digested by the help of lipase. So the pancreatic juice called as lipase acts on emulsified fat, or it will digest the emulsified fat into further products. So the pancreatic juice is acting on all the 3 components of the food, that is carbohydrate, protein as well as on fat. Next, the small intestine itself, the walls of the small intestine itself can produce this intestinal juice. It will produce many kind of intestinal juice, and that intestinal juice will complete the digestion process. So all the components of the food will be completely digested by the intestinal juice. So the intestinal juice produced in the intestine acts on carbohydrate, protein and fats completely. So what is the final product you are getting after digestion is carbohydrate is finally broken down into the final product called as glucose. Protein is finally broken down into final product called as amino acid, and the fat is finally broken down into the final product called as fatty acid and glycerol. So now carbohydrate, protein and fat is completely digested where? So complete digestion is happening in small intestine. So what is the final product you are getting? Glucose, amino acid and fatty acid plus glycerol. Now these 3 components are the simplest form of the food which we have eaten, completely digested. Now these are the smaller particles, smaller simpler particles which can be easily absorbed by our blood cells. So how it will be absorbed? It will be absorbed by the walls of the small intestine. So small intestine's wall, if you take a cross section of a small intestinal wall, you can see it will be having finger-like projections in it. So small intestine is having a finger-like projection in the inner side of the wall. So this finger-like projection present in the inner side of the wall are called as villi. So these finger-like projections are called as villi. So what is the function of villi? What is the use of villi? Villi helps in increasing the surface area of absorption. So otherwise the cross section is very small, right? So in that much area only little amount of food will be absorbed. So to increase the surface area of absorption, they have the walls of the inner wall of the stomach has been, inner wall of the small intestine has been folded into a finger-like structure. So it will increase the surface area of absorption and it will help in absorbing these components. So the food components will be absorbed by the finger-like projection present in the small intestine. So this will be asked in the exam. What is villi? Where is it present? What is its function? So villi is a finger-like projection. Where it is present? It is present in the inner wall of the small intestine. What is its function? Its function is to absorb the digested food from the small intestine. So after absorbing the food from the small intestine, where does it go? It enters into the blood. It will enter into the blood capillaries. So this small intestine will be completely surrounded by the blood capillaries. So from the small intestine villi, the food will be absorbed directly into the blood present in the blood capillaries, and it will be circulated throughout the body. So absorption, what is the next process? Digestion is completed in the small intestine, then is absorption happening. So that absorption happens in the small intestine itself by the help of a structure called as villi present in the inner wall of the small intestine. So that is absorption processes happen. So we have come to the third step in the digestion. Ingestion is over, digestion is over, the third is absorption. So absorption is over. Now what? Assimilation. What is assimilation? It's the process of using that food to maintain our body, right? So to maintain the life. So that food energy, the food component which has been absorbed from the small intestine enters into the blood. Blood will supply that food to all parts of our body. There the food has been broken down to produce energy, right? It will undergo respiration process and the food will be broken down to produce energy. And some of the food is used to growth, helps in growth. Some of the food is used for repairing. So all kind of maintenance work happen. Assimilation process happens. That is utilizing the absorbed food happens within our body. So that is assimilation has been completed. So assimilation is a process wherein the food which has been absorbed has been used up by our body, by which the organism can grow, repair and maintain all other kind of works happening in the body. So after the assimilation, what is the last process? Is digestion, that is removal of the waste. So in the small intestine the food has been absorbed. So all the components has not been absorbed. Some of the undigested food particle which is there in the small intestine will be pushed into the large intestine. So all the component, whatever food we are eating is not completely digested. So there will be some part of the food which cannot be digested. So that undigested part of the food which cannot be digested has to be removed from the body. So only the digested food has been absorbed, remaining undigested waste has been pushed from small intestine into the large intestine. Finally the food is entering into the large intestine now. So it contains what? It contains all kind of undigested waste. So undigested waste will be entering into a small intestine, into a large intestine. There what happens? There some kind of absorption takes place. What has been absorbed there? So there you can find the absorption of water. Absorption of water happens in large intestine. So in large intestine, absorption of water takes place. So water is needed for our body. So if there is any extra water in them, it will be absorbed and the undigested waste will be solidified. It will be converted into a solid form. Then the solid form of waste will be then stored in the bulge region in the large intestine called as rectum. It will be stored in rectum portion of the large intestine. So it will be the bulge portion of the large intestine called as rectum. So it will be stored in the part of the large intestine called as rectum. It will be stored temporarily in the rectum and then it will be released out through the anus. So it will be digested out. So digestion process happens there. So that is the completion of nutrition process in human being. So we started with ingestion, digestion, absorption, assimilation and digestion. So that is the complete process happening during the nutrition process of human being. So here you can see one more small structure in the junction of the small intestine and large intestine, a part called as appendix. Actually this appendix is, it was considered as to be a waste organ, a vestigial organ. Vestigial organ means organ which is of no use, but it's not a completely a vestigial organ. It contains some kind of bacteria which actually helps in digestion process as well. But if at all any kind of infection happen to that region, so if at all when we eat some kind of food, the germs or bacteria may infect this part called as appendix. So that infection caused to that appendix part is called as appendicitis. So what do you do when you get appendicitis is, do a surgery and cut off that portion. So it is, even if it is cut off, there is no harm to the human body. So that portion which is considered as a vestigial organ will be cut if it has been infected. So if it has not been removed after the infection, then you may even lose your life itself. So it may burst open and you may lose the life. So if at all you have got any kind of infection in the appendicitis, you will have to operate it and you have to remove the part. So that is about the nutrition process in human being. So in the next session we will be learning about the next topic, that is respiration process. So we will be winding up the class today. We will meet you in the next session. Thank you.